When I started, it was like, let's make the numbers.
Yeah.
You know what? I hit the number, Chris. And that's when I knew it was over.
Right. What do you mean?
I had it in my mind. I needed to earn this number.
You reached that point
Then
where...
I reached it, felt good for about 10 seconds. And then I thought, is that it?
Hung Lee, welcome to the Purpose-Led Leadership Podcast. Delighted to have you on the show. For those who don't know you, and you're very well renowned on LinkedIn, but tell the audience a bit about what you do now, and then we'll delve into the history of that.
What I do now, it's a really difficult question to answer, Chris, because in my view, I don't do a lot. But the bottom line is I basically write a newsletter, I do a podcast, and I kind of curate a community of recruiters worldwide. So I see my role as essentially trying to connect that recruitment ecosystem together through these channels that I'm working on.
Wow, that's very succinct. No, absolutely. I want to delve into that, the newsletter, the podcast, and you've built a bit of an authority on LinkedIn, which is really good. I want to delve into that. But this is called the Purpose-Led Leadership Podcast. And what I like to do is go back a bit deeper and a bit kind of previous to your work. So if you don't mind, paint us a picture of your journey kind of almost since school to now, and any kind of adversity you've had and just that human side, Hung.
There's obviously, everyone has moments of adversity, and it's probably ambient adversity, right? So lots of people have this type of pressure. But if there's one moment I can say that absolutely did pivot my direction, I can very clearly tell you what that was. And that was basically as I was going through school, college, university, I was pretty much not interested in the world of work.
Right.
And in fact, I'd actually kind of made choices to more or less avoid having to interact with the corporate world in any way.
Mm-hmm.
I did like sociology, history, anthropology, all these choices were there to try and say, right, I'm going to do something different. I don't really want to get involved in that suit and tie type of world.
Yeah.
And I when academically, maybe it was a potential for me going down that route. Studied anthropology at a good university. Thought maybe I'd be one of these guys that'd be like an ethnologist or something, go to a remote tribe somewhere and study there, live with them for 6 months or whatnot.
Yeah.
But as I was doing that course, I ended up like inevitably getting a bit disillusioned with the discipline. I thought there was some ethical problems with that entire idea in the end. And I kind of emerged from university with a kind of a disappointment on the choices that I made on there, and then not quite committed to a direction or a path that I wanted to take. So I had this kind of limbo period, which was really tough to negotiate. And then I had a car crash.
Right.
Then I had a significant kind of road traffic accident, I'm afraid to say. No one died, pleased to say.
How old were you then?
I was 22, I think, 21.
Right. Okay.
So just after university,
yeah.
Just at that moment when I was like, oh, what am I doing? Anyway, we have this big smash. I was banged up. And I spent basically 18 months recuperating from sort of injuries and what have you. And those 18 months give you a lot of time, right? Give you a lot of time. You've got a lot of time to yourself. You're thinking a lot. And you have to kind of make harder choices than perhaps you didn't have to make when you didn't have these challenges. So I remember like going backwards and forwards out of hospital. It was a lot of surgery basically, and it was like each time I was like very determined that I'm going to recover from this, like properly physio, go completely to the max each time. Then you had another surgery and that set you back, and you had to just go back again to dive into to recover it. And through all of that, I just thought, what, by the time I get out of this, I'm going to be like 23, 24 years old. I'm already way behind everyone else.
Right.
All my mates were at university, they'd gone to graduates, they were already moving into management, getting stuff going on in life. And I was thinking, actually, Hung, you need to pick you need to get real. The real world doesn't look like the world that you thought it was.
Yeah.
And if you need to think about what you've got to do, your responsibilities, the family, all that kind of stuff, you better start getting on with it. And that's when I thought, right, I'm going to London, I'm going to get the job that's going to pay me as much money as quickly as I can. What the hell was that going to be?
Wow. So in a way, at that time, you probably felt this is the darkest moment. It's really terrible and it's awful to go through. But in a way, maybe that actually galvanized you, and it was a bit of a hiatus, and maybe it was a good thing that happened.
I'm very philosophical about it. I'd rather it didn't, is the truth.
Right.
Because at the time I don't get back, and obviously the physical side of it, never plays good football again. I mean, that was clear.
Right. Yeah.
I lost about 1.5 inches off my left leg, so
Oh,
basically my walking is a bit weird. I met with a mate of mine today, and he said, "Yeah, Hung, you still got the strut." I said, "Rob, it's not a strut. I've actually got a walking impediment. The leg is shorter than my mind still thinks it is. 20 years down, that sort of after the fact, my mind is still thinking the stride length should be a bit longer, but so I kind of stumble a little bit. So all that stuff, I know that's not great, and it's going to have some effect down the road and stuff. So obviously I wouldn't want it to happen. But I'm philosophical because it could have been far worse, far worse. And I do see it as like God's grace, second chance.
Yeah,
absolute second chance. I was like this far away from not only me but other people.
Yeah. So one of the things you said just before that, when you said you had that time to yourself. So from my point of view, when I built my huge business and it kind of went a little bit south, I got divorced and kind of like I was forced to have time to myself. And that's when I personally really had the opportunity to work on myself and pivot and do personal development. And I think that enabled me to find my purpose. So on that point, do you feel that time to yourself enabled you to do that? Or what's your understanding of purpose? What's the importance of purpose to you, and what is your purpose?
So the answer is yes. I think these days we struggle to have that type of space. And I think it may even be impossible in this media age that we're in, where there's so many things getting distracted and what have you.
Yeah.
Back when I had my accident, the internet was around, but not in the same degree as it was. And literally TV was still the thing where you'd get your information.
Yes.
And you wouldn't necessarily be online. You weren't watching videos, anything like that. You certainly weren't doing any social networking. So there was an isolation there. And that isolation does force you to have to confront that internal dialogue that oftentimes we were scared to talk to that person, right?
Yeah.
So I had a lot of time to think about this.
I agree with that. I think that they say that talking to yourself is insanity, but I walk into the bathroom mirror every day and I talk to myself. I tell myself I love myself, and I think emotional intelligence and the ability to love yourself and talk to yourself plays a huge part in every aspect of your life, right?
100%. And we ignore that inner voice too often, right? We ignore the inner voice. We're scared of it because it's going to tell us some truths that we've been hiding, we were ashamed of, or whatever it is. And in that circumstance, you are you're naked in front of yourself, is the truth.
Yes, absolutely.
Like there's nothing to talk about. It's like, this is what's happened, this is where you're at, and there's no one to talk to. Like, you've just got to deal with this. So yeah, give me a purpose. The purpose was clear. It was fairly money oriented.
Right.
I held, so I wasn't driving the car. My mum was driving the car. She was very ill. She should never be driving that car. And I felt hugely responsible for the fact that she was still having to drive around when she was ill. I thought, I need to make my mum retired. I need to sort her out so that she doesn't have to work again. So I thought, right, I want to get a job. I want to go. Recruitment was the thing that was lucrative and fast, and I want to make as much money as I can. And I want to make that thing happen. So I would say first 10 years of my career in recruitment was pretty bang on money oriented.
So what, you kind of had the accident and kind of found yourself to a degree, and then you fell into recruitment, or you went into recruitment deliberately, or what happened?
Deliberately. Right. It was literally one of those where, right, where am I going to make the money fastest? Yeah. So that would probably surprise a lot of people that know me now, because I'm not money oriented. Truthfully, I'm not money oriented. It wasn't like avaricious. It was more a case of, right, I just need to put a few things right and give security to people that I care about. And that was the main motivator. So anyway, it was like, okay, let's do that. And I was fortunate to go into the right kind of company that also I thought had some strong values and strong ethical guardrails. So I wasn't doing anything too crazy. So I never operated in any wild way per se. I just worked for a good company in a booming market and, worked hard. And I think recruitment is, the combination of market choice, your own work ethic, and general level of smarts. If you bring those three things together, you should be doing good. You should be doing okay.
So values and recruitment, those outside the industry and some inside the industry will think that often doesn't happen together. But I actually think there are some great recruiters out there. There are some great businesses out there that do have values. But what's your kind of opinion of the recruitment landscape in terms of how's it evolved, how's it changed? We get a lot of bad press, don't we? All that kind of stuff.
I mean, I think the bad press is always going to stay with us, sadly enough.
Yeah.
You've got to think from a candidate point of view, and having us all being candidates, we understand that sort of going through a recruiting process is often not a pleasant thing. You might find yourself involuntarily looking for work, for instance. Or if you remember the last time you applied for a job, it's like no one feels particularly good about the application process because you've got a bunch of people judging you and assessing you and having you to jump through hoops, and you're being judged. So I think a lot of the inherent natures of recruitment and job search, the back is unpleasant, and that's going to wash back on the front end of that, and that's us in recruiting. There are ethical problems with the business, of course. I think this is based on incentives. When you think about recruiters, agency side particularly, we are generally unpaid work half the time, more than half the time. Therefore, of course, we're going to do things in an optimal way. We're going to risk mitigate ourselves. And what that means is ultimately less than perfect experience for other people. So I think there's a lot of misaligned incentives that kind of creates the recruiter behavior that other people might feel a little bit uncomfortable with.
So when you say misaligned incentives, what do you mean? Like,
well, I would say traditional agencies are basically paid on contingent model. So you're not getting paid until you get sort of the deal in, so to speak. So effectively working for free. And whilst that big deal lands in, it's all great. But it's effectively subsidizing all of that other work that you were never paid for. It's impossible to be the sort of recruiter that's going to give absolutely equally best service to every candidate and every client that you're dealing with. In fact, one of the key criteria to success as a recruitment agent is to be able to select which are your priority customers and which are your priority candidates, because of the nature of how we're paid.
It's just unrealistic to expect us to get back to every single candidate. I know there's rules and protocols that we should, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think going back to your point about fees, obviously candidates are our lifeblood, and I do think that perhaps recruiters treat candidates less important than they do clients, but the candidate doesn't pay a fee. So I think that plays a part in that, right?
It hugely plays a part in it, but that's probably not as well understood as it needs to be. And whether recruiters have a responsibility to explain that to the wider market, or other people need to do that, I don't know. But the truth is, let's say it takes basically job seekers a couple of goes around the track before they're aware, this is how recruitment works. And bear in mind, sort of most people don't habitually look for work. It's a very episodic thing. 2.5 years is probably still the average tenure for a skilled person. So
absolutely,
you think over a course of a career, how many times are they actually engaging in recruitment agents? Probably not a huge amount. Sort of over that period of time, but episodically they'll do that, and it's a new thing every time. So it's no surprise that they don't quite understand how the system works.
And you made a good point there. That there's no real permanency anymore. I think if a permanent role can last 2-3 years, you're doing well. And I think that I put a few posts out recently about recruitment being one of the hardest sales jobs in the world, and most people agree, and some people didn't, that they felt come off it. But actually, the reality is, we are selling something, as in a person, that's our product, I don't know how else to describe it, that can change their mind, can sell themselves somewhere else. It's not like selling a car or a watch or a book, or, I think people don't necessarily understand the actual emotional intelligence and the instinct and the other soft skills you need to be successful in recruitment.
I think that's a very well put, Chris. The reality of it is, without that EQ, it's going to be very, very tough to do this job effectively. At some level, you've just got to understand how human beings work, the motivations that people have,
Yes.
why this person is behaving the way in which they're doing. I think you have to be curious about people, like genuinely interested in where they're coming from.
Totally agree. Isn't it a paradox though that recruitment companies are very good generally at placing and doing recruitment for their clients, but not very good at doing it for themselves? Why do you think that is?
I think for the same reasons why recruitment is difficult, which is that we are very susceptible to kind of the signals of success.
Yeah.
So in other words, we're reluctant to hire someone who hasn't previously been excellent at the recruitment job. And we see someone else who has been previously excellent, we automatically assume they'll be excellent for us. And that's basically called credentialism, right? Like this person has worked for this company at this level, therefore they must be good. Whereas we all know, and probably we know in sort of deep down ourselves, that it's all contextual. You know, it's like football. I don't know whether you're a football fan, but
I'm a big Spurs fan for my sins.
For your sins, but you get it. Spurs is a good example. Oftentimes, a great player would arrive from a different club, goes into a different system, and suddenly he's on the bench. He's terrible, whatever. Has that person turned into a terrible player overnight? Yeah, maybe. But most of the time, it's because the fit is not right. And hiring anybody is the same. Even for a organizationally simple, kind of non-complex business like a recruitment agency, it's a pretty simple organization when you think about it. It's still about the fit in team, the fit for the client base, the fit for the style of recruiting you do. That's not always obvious.
I agree with that. I also think there's a sense of a lack of permanency in terms of there's almost too much urgency. The recruitment consultant business wants the deal this month, wants the deal this week, and therefore they almost want the candidate and the hires to get up to speed really quickly. So they kind of rush the process. They get the bum on the seat, and they don't take that due diligence and the time. They don't align their decisions with the values. I think that's a big issue with recruitment, with the burnout side of things. It's like, come on, slow down a little bit.
Well, again, we go to incentives. I mean, one of the things that is strange about the recruitment world is it's pretty easy how you grow the value of your company, and that's like get another fee earner into the company. And the sooner that person starts earning fees, the better. So that's that simple. So yeah, I mean, people default to pressure. Very rarely are you given any time. And oftentimes it is sink or swim type scenario. Thankfully, I think, not thankfully, but basically through kind of just law of survival, most recruiters, I think, already have that kind of agility to succeed in that way, because that's basically how we all started anyway. I mean, I remember, you know, back in my day, over recruiting on the graduate side or the entry side was pretty normal. You know, you'd hire 7 people for 3 roles, and it would be a survival of the fit scenario. You wouldn't tell the candidates, but you find out later on.
It was a bums on seats thing, but then I think it was also making 100 calls and work till you kind of die kind of scenario, isn't it? But I think that whole thing has actually changed, and I think the good recruitment agencies and leaders recognize that. They're looking at personal branding, they're looking at flexible, and I think what worked 10, 15 years ago worked. I mean, I came from an S3 background, but nowadays it's changed, right? But I think it's changed for the better.
Well, I'm not sure whether it has changed so much. I bow to your greater sort of awareness and connection with that world. In some respects, I think, you know what, that's the style of business, and if they want to run it that way, I'm kind of cool with it, so long as that's transparent and obvious to everyone else. It's like to each their own. And hey, lots of people have been very successful and made loads of money doing that. So who's to say that's not the right way to adopt it? Having said that, maybe there are ways in which you can still make money but still have a more humane way of doing it, and you know, kind of a better feeling for all of the stakeholders involved in that interaction.
Definitely. So you touched on let's continue that journey. You said sort of 10 years in recruitment. Talk us a bit about that journey. What sort of stuff you did, and then sort of to now. If that's okay.
Yeah, no worries. So basically, I was in agency recruitment, did tech recruiting. So this was, you know, back in the day when web developers became a thing. I became a guy that basically recruited web developers and product managers and what were then called producers to web companies, essentially. Did well. It was my kind of vibe. and that basically built, after 3 years of recruiting and doing well, more or less that's the direction you travel. So ended up working for a load of different recruiters, split away from my first employer, and set up a company with a bunch of friends, senior recruiters of that business. We did a lot of tech recruiting again, this time public sector stuff.
Cool.
2009, basically I stopped agency work. Kind of strange one in the sense I had best year ever. Really hit the numbers I was looking to hit. When I started, it was like, let's make the numbers. You know what? I hit the number, Chris. And that's when I knew it was over.
Right. What do you mean?
It was, I had it in my mind, I needed to earn this number.
You reached that point
Then I reached it, felt good for about 10 seconds. Then I thought, is that it?
Yeah.
And then already I was thinking, right, I've achieved that.
How did it feel though? This really resonates with me. I say all the time, I got to 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, whatever the number was. And every time I got there, it was like, oh, okay. It was like, and it kind of enabled me to think that money wasn't actually my primary driver.
Dude, that's exactly the feeling. Like I realized, not that 10-year journey was an error, because I did a lot of things at that time which I wouldn't be able to do if I was working a normal job.
Yeah.
Buy a property, get on that, get rid of those problems. That was great. But in terms of personal sense of mission, that was when the purpose changed.
Yes.
Because I thought, right, I hit this number. That's great. Now what? Do I just set another number? It just wouldn't motivate me.
Where do you stop? Yeah.
And it was at this time, this is like 2009, when, social media was starting to happen. Loads of, for me, that was like, this is going to change the game in terms of how recruitment's going to work.
Right.
We don't quite know how that's going to look, but it's definitely going to change the game. I need to understand how that works, and get, if you like, embrace the future rather than keep plowing onto the past and just eke out some more cash in, in this old way of working. So I just quit my job.
Wow.
I popped out and I thought, I'm just going to study this for 6 months, try and figure out whether I can make some money somehow, not a huge plan in doing it, but because I've earned the money, I had a buffer, right? So I had, it was a low risk decision to make.
Sure.
And I ended up thinking, maybe if I learn enough social media stuff, I could then teach recruitment agencies all about this new world and they could do all this, that and the other. Total failure. Didn't sell a single thing in a year, right? So literally the worst thing to sell into the recruitment agency, this new world. And I was thinking, okay, what do I do now? I'm not quite sure. But I live in East London, live in this area. And of course, this is at the same time with a lot of tech startups were happening,
of course.
A lot of really interesting companies. And these companies were inherently interested in innovative ways to recruit. It's in the DNA of tech startups to essentially disrupt, and they wanted to do everything differently. And so that was a perceptive audience when I was saying, hey, listen, if you set up a brand in here, you start talking to software engineers in this way, you'd actually build a talent pool you could recruit from. And then eventually I ended up working in-house for a lot of these tech startup companies.
Wow, okay.
That were, typically they were 90-day jobs. They were.
What was that transition like? Because like a recruiter, tends to say, I'll never go in-house again. But actually what I found is, not that I've done it, but my experience tells me that the in-house piece is actually more fulfilling and even more difficult than actual being a recruiter.
It's fulfilling and difficult, but in different ways. It's psychologically a different job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though I think they're totally transferable, but you do need to do things differently, and the main shift is a psychological shift. So one of the key differences, there's no hiding place when you're in-house. Because you're literally sitting there next to the CEO and he's thinking, where the fuck are the people? Right. So it's not like where you're an agent, you can dodge the customer and you can make sure you're not there. You can't do that here. There's one customer, you're sitting right there, you just have to be there. That's a different type of pressure. The second difference is that you are like really committed to the personalities that you're bringing into your team, and you can start seeing it happen. I remember growing one business from, I came in as employee 10, I think, took it to 45, not many, right? But at least 3 times. By the time I left, like they were all my friends. They were almost like a family because I was the guy bringing them all in. So they all saw me as someone who they trusted. I was the first contact for this business. So that sense I don't think you get as an agent.
No.
So that sense of belonging, that sense of team building.
More transactional, I guess, isn't it, than in-house, I would say.
It is. And like I say, I think either one can do the other. I've seen transitions, everyone who's an in-house recruiter more or less has gone agency route in the first place. So I really dislike the antagonism sometimes you have between the two types of recruiter because it's really the same, community.
I agree with that.
But yeah, it's the mental shift. The mental shift is big.
Brilliant. So 10 years in recruitment and then you went in-house. You learned that element. What else happened after that?
So after that, of course, hiring all these developers, I ended up making mates with a lot of developers, and it's great to hang out with people that can actually build stuff. I remember very clearly there was a friend of mine who had left the first company that I recruited him for, and he was on the market again, and he was complaining to me about recruiters because obviously I'm responsible for the behaviors of everyone else he spoke to, and he said, why do you guys always call me for work I don't want to do anymore? I don't want to do PHP, I want to do React. Why are you calling me for this? And I was thinking, firstly, it's not my fault. It's like I didn't make this call. But second, that's very interesting. Why is it that you get called for work that you don't want to do anymore? Then I started thinking the reason for this is because the information that recruiters have is all historical. All the information we have on a candidate is what that person has done in the past. But recruiting, Chris, is about what you want to do in the future. What's the next step? That component is missing. Then I started thinking and talking with Gordon, who's ended up being co-founder of Workshape, the technology platform that I launched, which was, can we collect the information about what the person wants to do in the future? And can we use that information to help match with companies that are hiring for that type of role?
So it's not about what you've done, it's about what you can do.
It was about we all validate what this person has already done.
That makes sense.
But rather than have the employer try and figure out what he wants or pitch too hard about what this person wants, we're going to just find out what style of work this person most enjoys. We're going to visualize it, then we're going to match that to a company that's created a job in the same way.
This is really interesting because I talk about my business is called Base Mindset, and it stands for behaviors, attitudes, skills, and experience, because I think a lot of businesses, they hire on skills and experience and they fire on behaviors and attitude. But I think the behaviors and attitude are the ones you want to look at as important or more important than anything else, right? What do you think to that? And also, what do you think about I think there used to be, candidates used to be called self-entitled, but I think there's businesses out there that have an air of superiority and think the candidate needs to run through a brick wall to get the job and all that kind of stuff. I think that's changing as well. What do you think to those?
I think it's definitely changing on that last point. No question. Maybe you rewind back 20, 30 years, and there still are companies, typically they're the biggest brands, the strongest type of brand presence. They do have this supercilious attitude to the market.
Absolutely.
That you want to work for us. And they create sort of a trial, a real tough assault course of an assessment process to go through. And what that means is you do actually need to have a highly motivated person to go through that. What it also means is a bunch of people that are highly skilled that don't have the motivation because they've got other options. And you're basically saying no to all of those people because of this kind of hostile sort of channel that you've created for them to swim down. So I think the world is changing. I hope. I think that we need to equalize the relationship between candidate and employer. It's always been hierarchically employer here, applicant, basically supplicant, right, begging for the job. That's got to change, and it is changing. It needs to be much more of a peer-to-peer type conversation, especially for the highly skilled in demand. Otherwise, you're not going to get that highly skilled person, and you're going to lose out on the top talent.
So what? That's really good. So what pisses you off about the recruitment industry?
What annoys me about the recruitment industry, I think we're a bit faddish. We're always part of the thing that is positive about it is our agility. Our ability to understand what new trends are, our ability to kind of quickly reimagine how we might provide value. But at the same time, sort of that can also be a weakness because it means that we jump on the bandwagons real quickly and we inauthentically endorse certain things because that's the cool thing to do. So maybe that's not unique to recruiting, but I do see it as conspicuous, maybe because I'm in the industry. It annoys me a little bit, not a huge amount, but it's
that's fair. That's fair. So if you asked me about 5 years ago, about marketing and personal brand, I would have gone like, well, "Don't talk to me," or I don't see it's important. It's fluffy. But now, it's my number one thing around how I've built my business and how I've pivoted myself. And I believe in personal brand. But what's your view on that in terms of in the recruitment sector? I feel there's a long way to go for the recruitment sector in particular to really kind of grasp that and actually see it as something that's, well, it's the way it's going, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'm surprised myself, especially for the style of work recruiters do, which is communication, it's broadcasting, it's advertising half the time. We should be really, so we should grok employ personal brand.
Yes.
But it's not native to a lot of recruiters.
No.
A lot of people are not quite comfortable with it. Maybe it's because they don't understand how to separate personal brand from the company that they're working for, and they're not quite sure how to play that one. But in my view is if you're not exploiting your personal brand, you're leaving money on the table if you're an agent. And if you're an internal person, you're definitely leaving candidates on the table.
Yeah.
If you think about one of the key reasons why you would pick up a phone call or you respond to an email from a person is if you know the person in some way.
Absolutely.
That's messaged you. If you're Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous and it's just yet another message from yet another agency or recruiter, you're going to ignore that. But if I know this person, I've read a blog, I've listened to a podcast, this person resonates in some way, you're going to much more likely to respond. And if you speak to any recruiter over the last 2 years or so, they would tell you that the major problem in recruiting is engagement with candidates. It's not so much about candidate discovery. It's about getting candidates to talk to you. So,
but also as well, if the client presented the JD in a video or something like that, I mean, the candidate's more likely to want to work for that. So I think you can convey that to your clients as well. I think it's about engaging with making sure clients have that human side as well, rather than here's a JD, go and find me that person. Because actually, as I said before, more often than not, people are buying from people, and you want to know about the softer skills of the person as much as, unless it's a developer, of course. But I just think it's really important to do that. But isn't that in terms of what you're doing now? You're doing this kind of stuff now, right? Are you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, recruiting brain food is pretty much tied to my personal brand, I guess.
Right.
And it was designed a little bit that way, in the sense I never thought of it as a business that's incorporated. There's a reason why I haven't hired people to work under it and whatnot, because I wanted to say, what, can one person do this? And it's definitely me all the time. So it is kind of philosophically based on that, even though it's not there to push my own perspective too much. Like what I try to do is essentially connect and create conversations, or allow other people to have conversations. So it's not so much about Hung Lee thinks this. It's about, here's an interesting topic, why don't we discuss it?
So talk to me about that, because you said you do the newsletter and the podcast and what. So how do you, if you don't mind me asking, how do you monetize that community that you've got? How does that business work?
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Sponsor model. So it is, I think when you're doing something that I'm doing, you can either do, you make the money from the members, which is subscription based, or you could do it through sponsors, which is the way which I've chosen to do it. And the reason for that is ultimately the sponsors all come inbound, so it's quite efficient to acquire the revenue. And secondly, if I went subscription, which I'm not saying I'm ruling out in future, but if I did do that as the main way to make the money, I'd end up having to create two bits of content. One that's behind some sort of subscription wall, and another that's free. And I feel that ends up being a little bit elitist. So I wanted to say, you know what, it's just the same content for everybody. Everyone can consume that. And companies that want to raise their brand awareness with my audience, who are recruiters, HR people in recruiting, they can sponsor a newsletter or sponsor a podcast.
So what type of what do you think it takes to build a successful recruitment business these days? What should people be doing first, or what sort of stuff should they be implementing, do you think?
Successful recruitment business, I think the cliche is true. You basically need to have great people early. right? So let's say I'm starting as one person and I want to grow a business. Your first 4 hires, let's say, as billers in your business, they're critically important for your business. In order to get that right, you need to understand what is driving you to do your work.
Totally.
Because that is going to determine what the key values of your company are going to be.
100%.
And here I step back from, describing values as good values versus bad values, or good culture versus bad culture. I think what is true is that is an honest culture, and that's an inauthentic culture. So just be honest with who and what you are. Then you'll attract the people that embrace that. And don't try and jump on the bandwagon and say all the nice things, because guess what? If you don't mean it and it's not true,
100%.
you're going to end up attracting people that aren't right for your business. You're going to hate them, they're going to hate you, and you're going to spend a huge amount of time basically wrestling with that, rather than going ahead and driving forward to hit your numbers.
I totally agree. And if you look at 100 recruitment websites, 95 of them will say pretty much the same thing, and there is no kind of differentiator. But also, I think you're right. You can have the values written on the wall on your website, but unless you're living and breathing them, it doesn't matter.
I hate it when companies go away for an offsite and think about their values and all this. Look, if you need to go away and do that, then if your values aren't obvious from the CEO, I'm sorry, it comes from the person who set the business up. That will tell you what the values of the business are. So the CEO needs to be able to communicate, just document what the hell he or she is operating on. Like, what is the driver? One of the key things is, you also have to do a forced choice. It's like, what is the number one thing that is most important to you in your business? And everyone's going to say the same thing. It's like, ethical, this, that, the other. Great. Okay. You want to do a forced choice, this or that, one or the other. And you play a game and you keep knocking them out until you come with one that is, you'll 100%. Not lose this no matter what is the case. The company's values are the ones that you won't compromise, even if the company fails. That's what a value is.
And you need to base most of all, if not all of your important decisions on those values. That's the whole point of having them, right?
When there's a crisis. I think it's easy to make decisions.
Make allowances, I guess.
But, when there's no pressure and it doesn't matter either way. But when there's a crisis, the chips are down and you don't know as a leader where to go, the values will tell you what it is. That's your
anchor. And that's got me out of trouble so many times, when it's like, what do I do here? I'm gonna have to do that, and that's it. But also, I think so. When my clients ask me to come in and grow their revenue, grow their headcount, all this kind of operations, and I say, before we even think about that, what's your vision of the business? What's your purpose? And 9 times out of 10, they don't actually know. And it's not about money; it's more about other. So I think understanding what the vision is really important. Where we're going, I think that's massively important. Do you agree with that?
I do, and I'm surprised that these founders of recruitment agencies can't tell you that. I mean, maybe they feel it's uncomfortable for them to say, I want to make a lot of money. I think that's totally okay to say. Most businesses are profit making, or try to make profit. That's the purpose of it. So I see no reason why that's not a positive thing.
I think it is, and then we get to the point when, and it kind of comes out that they want money, they want to build it to 25 or 30 million, and it's like, well, okay, but why? It's like, I want to have freedom of choice. Why do you want freedom of choice? Because I want to spend more time with my family and spend more time with my children. Actually, so the most important thing in this whole thing, the reason why you're doing this is to spend more time with the children. So why are you doing 100 hours a week and asking everyone else to do that? And it's kind of like, it's taking a step back, and actually you don't have to kill yourself to achieve that as well. And I think in my experience, why I went wrong, I didn't do that. I put all my eggs in that basket, and I eventually burnt out a couple of times. And I feel that you have to work bloody hard, right? But I think there's a smart way to do things, and I think it's recognizing what else is important apart from the business. Because actually, taking a step back, put some effort into your relationships, your personal development, your health, you execute better in the business anyway. And I think where we go wrong in recruitment sometimes, I think that we expect people just to sort of get up at 6 o'clock and work till midnight, and eventually it all goes wrong.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's a job that you could, if you had 26 hours in a day, you could do 26 hours.
Yeah, of course.
Because it doesn't ever end. And it takes you a little while before you realize that. And truth be told, if you do extra hours, if you get that extra candidate, you get that extra demo in or whatever it might be, you will probably do a little bit better than the person that doesn't do that. So we shouldn't diminish that hard work does produce incrementally some results.
Yeah.
But you've got to balance that out with the price you pay. And as you say, you can very quickly burn out in this industry, and over the lifetime value, if you like, that you give to yourself, then you don't want to be the person that's done after 6 years and then you're doing something else because you're a shell of a man.
Totally. So we're coming towards kind of the last sort of 5 minutes of the podcast. On the whole burnout thing and the well-being thing, back in the day when we were doing it, it was like those mental health burnout, when you get frog marched out of the building if you mention those words, but nowadays I think there is more awareness of that. But with yourself personally, talk to us about any kind of adversity or your mental health journey. How do you feel about that as a thing for you and in general?
I think firstly, the first thing to say on this is that I think it's very, very positive that we're much more transparent about talking about mental health issues.
Yeah.
Quite right. Back in our day, wasn't spoken about. And there was a risk to do so, right? If you went in and said, listen, boss, I think I've got this, guess what? Yeah, they're going to get hammering right there and then. Yeah. Or you'd be marked down in some way to say, you're right, he's crackers, he's losing it, or that type of language would be used to describe what you've articulated there. So that's the first thing to say. Having said that, my own approach probably is quite old school. So even though I recognize old school is potentially bad on aggregate for the marketplace, my own way of dealing with it is always through kind of like an internal dialogue. Right, sure. I don't think I'm the person that I'm pretty open doing what I'm doing. I hope people recognize that. But I don't feel that I bring problems to people that easily. And the baseline philosophy to this, and by the way, any psychologist listens to this, I'd be pleased to know whether this is healthy or not, or what your professional opinion is. But my baseline philosophy is, look, I'm the best person, I'm in best position to handle this because this problem is mine. Sure. I have greater context as to what this problem is, and I have more information than anybody else. Therefore, if someone's going to deal with it, it's going to be me. I can speak to some other person. Maybe they can give you some insight. Maybe they can give me some personal support or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, I still got to deal with it.
Taking accountability.
I wouldn't use that term. I just think it's a fact. Right. I do think it's a fact.
So self-belief thing, confidence thing, right?
I wouldn't even use those terms. I don't want to be obtuse, but it's almost like context is so important, right?
Yeah, I see.
As a leader of a business, if you're the person that has the most context, then you've got clarity. You've got to make the decision. You know all of the things about your life.
I saw a Simon Sinek thing on Instagram recently about the Marines, and sometimes a leader just needs to make a decision, not by committee, or take that choice and go, this is where we're going, right?
Yeah, and it's a little bit that way. Internally, it's to say, like, I don't have a sense that anybody else is gonna deal with it, and because of that, that helps me deal with it.
That's good.
Because if I had some sort of sense I could push this decision elsewhere or whatever, I probably would just lean too heavily elsewhere. So I've kind of always had this. So I guess my own way of dealing with mental health is, now that I think about it, it probably means I feel an agent in my own life, right? In the sense, I've got the ability to affect change, rather than it's this thing's happening, I can't deal with it. No, you can deal with it in many respects.
That's an interesting.
You're driving the car.
Interesting lens to that, because there's experts that say that when you have these mental health moments, episodes, it's about leaning into those feelings and seeking help. But I think you're right. I think you can get to a point where you've done that and you can actually manage that yourself, notwithstanding the fact that I know you're not saying that you have to deal with everything, right? You also need to have an acceptance that sometimes actually I might need help here as well. Yeah,
I haven't reached that place.
Right.
Maybe my problems are not significant enough, which I accept. Maybe they're too trivial. There's definitely people that've got loads more issues than I have. There's no question.
Right. Okay.
So I totally want to put
that. You got to do what's right for you, though. That's the thing, isn't it?
Right. So from my point of view and my experience, and maybe the trivial problems I've encountered, I felt that I've been able to deal with them, or if I've not dealt with them, then either I deserve it, and I will one day deal with it.
I like your attitude on that.
So it's like, okay, I got to just, who else is going to handle this? Is me. You know what I mean?
Okay. So a couple of more questions before we close. Going back to the car crash, or just before, you talked about academically and it didn't quite work out. So around that time, if we were to go back in time and you could change or do anything, what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? It's one of those, I don't have any regrets. I wouldn't do anything differently. I would simply be braver.
Right.
I'd simply be braver. I'd teach myself to be more courageous than I was then.
Okay.
And that's a going concern. Truth of the matter is, Chris, I could have stopped that accident.
Right.
I could have stopped it.
Do you still live with that regret?
Not really, because I didn't die and no one died. And if I still think, had I taken action, it may have caused more significant harm. Basically, I had a left or right decision to make in terms of grabbing the wheel. Do I turn it left or right? Had I got that wrong, that would have been a death for me and my mom for sure.
Right.
Had I got it right, we wouldn't have crashed. Right. And I froze at that time.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So the reason why I froze, I think, was quite plainly cowardice, like a failure of courage. Right. And I needed to teach myself to be able to take action more decisively until the absolute finite moment where I was at the mercy of the other driver,
right,
whose actions saved my life and saved my mum's life.
Right.
Because I saw the whites of his eyes, bro.
Wow.
I saw the whites of his eyes as he ran towards. He turned and he
saved your life.
Saved my life.
Yeah. That's amazing. Do you feel, because you feel you could have been courageous in that moment, you've actually utilized that and been courageous in other elements of your life?
I've tested my courage.
Yeah.
Like I went through a period being really disappointed in my failure of courage, right? And I started saying, what is courage? You know what? I'm gonna just every time I'm scared, I'm just gonna do that thing. That's what I decided in my own mind. I ended up making some stupid decisions, which I do not regret. Because
I always say I prefer to regret something I've done that I haven't done.
That's true. And you know, it's got to the point where I've realized, you know what? The most important thing is to recognize that you're a person that has more control and influence over your life than any other person around. You know, you are literally the person in charge. You're the commander of your own ship.
Sure.
Right. And you've just got to make those decisions with that mental model in mind. And that, I guess, you know, make sure that I hit decent beaches rather than hit the rocks more often than not.
Hung, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Before we leave, what's one thing you'd like to leave the audience with?
One thing I would say is kind of related to it, which is, you know, self-belief is simply understanding the fundamental truth of that earlier comment. You are the person that has more ability to determine your life outcomes than anybody else.
Absolutely.
Just understand that as a fact, and guess what? It'll start happening.
Fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure. Before we go, where can we find you? LinkedIn or?
Unfortunately, I hit the limit on LinkedIn. I'm sure you have as well, Chris. So I can't actually accept. It's really annoying. Best way, sign up to the newsletter, recruitingbrainfood.com. I communicate with people on email. It's the best way to keep in touch. So sign up to that and basically you're in.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much, Chris.